there are many people building the sukkah tonight, as well as I know in the malls they're selling the Daled Minim, so must be approaching Sukkot, which is tomorrow night, so we'll discuss some in Yani Sukkot. So one of the mitzvahs on Sukkot is Sukkah. There's a mitzvah, as we all know, of Yeshiva Sukkah. There's a mitzvah during Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres. Maybe that'll be next week's topic, but whether the mitzvah of sitting in the Sukkah and Shmini Atzeres, that's a discussion. But during the first 7 days, so there's a chiyuv to sit in the Sukkah. So if you're going to, so we always, there's a difference in the first night where you might have a chiyuv out to Suda. Other meals you might have a chiyuv out Suda, but there's a difference in Laila Rishon the other nights. But if you're going to have a Koveya Suda, so you have to have it in the Sukkah. So that's the mitzvah of sitting in the Sukkah. However, before you sit in the Sukkah, you usually have to build the Sukkah. If you don't shop on Erev Shabbos, you're not going to be eating on Shabbos. Similarly with Sukkah, if you don't build the Sukkah, you're not going to be able to sit in the Sukkah, at least not your own. Similarly, if you don't buy a Daled Minim, you're not going to be able to fulfill your mitzvah unless, of course, you borrow from someone else. Matana Manas V'Hagzir, you have to own it, L'kastem Lachem, but it's a mitzvah to shake the Daled Minim. There's no mitzvah per se to buy it. So at first glance, then building the sukkah is no different than buying a lulav and esrog. Buying the Daled Minim. If you don't buy it, it's a heichatim, so there's no mitzvah to buy it. But if you want to fulfill it, somehow you better get your hands on one. So too, that seems at first glance to be the same way by building a sukkah. If you want to be able to fulfill your mitzvah of yeshiva sukkah, you better build a sukkah, have someone build it for you. Kind of like the Rambam writes by shofar. We know the Rambam's opinion is that the mitzvah of shofar is l'shmoa kol shofar. The mitzvah is to hear the shofar. But if you don't blow the shofar, you're not going to hear it. So different interpretations of the Rambam. But those say the pshat in the Rambam, the tekiah is the hechsher mitzvah. You're right. Tekiah is not, if you assume along this pshat in the Rambam, the ikar, the main mitzvah is the shmiyah, and the tekiah is just the heichatimsa, it's a hechsher mitzvah in order to fulfill my mitzvah. There's no mitzvah per se of blowing the shofar. The mitzvah is the shmiyah, and the tekiah is like a hechsher, it's like buying the Daled Minim. Comes along the Netziv on the Shiltis, and he quotes also the Shiltis Rav Achai, that he points out that first, that according to some, there is a mitzvah of Asiyah Sukkah. Rashi in Makkos, I think it's on Daf Ches, writes that it's not the gathering of the wood isn't the mitzvah, but implying but the building of the sukkah is a mitzvah. Everyone quotes Rashi in Makkos. That building in a different context, but it's the Rashi, from that Rashi, that the building of the mitzvah itself, building of the sukkah itself is a mitzvah. And that seems to be the sheet of the Shiltis. Chayiv Adam, the obligation for everyone to build the sukkah and to sit in the sukkah. So there seems to be some shittas in the Rishonim that building a sukkah is a mitzvah. So why should building a sukkah, according to these opinions, why should it be any different than, let's say, blowing the shofar or buying the Daled Minim? It's a hechsher mitzvah, and that's it. Why is a sukkah any different than the other ones we mentioned? So there's a famous Netziv on the Shiltis. He develops his own theme, and he explains the two types of hechsher mitzvah. The two types of mitzvah which are used for preparation. There's the general hechsher mitzvah, like we said, if you want to eat on Shabbos, we'll see, maybe actually making the food, that might be something else, so we'll hold off on Shabbos for a second. But let's say buying the Daled Minim, it's a pure hechsher mitzvah. The Torah tells me I have to do this mitzvah, so I have to make all the necessary prerequisites to get it, but there's no mitzvah per se in buying. That's a classical hechsher mitzvah. It's the preparing, but it's nothing to do with the mitzvah itself. The reason why Asiyah Sukkah is different is because it's what the Netziv calls a hechsher mitzvah haksuva b'Torah. or Heksha Mitzvah Ksuva Bakra, that there's already a hint to this in the Torah itself. In other words, equal to Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi has this Yisod. The Yerushalmi writes that building a sukkah is a mitzvah. In fact, so much so, we'll see the Yerushalmi even writes, you make a bracha. And you build a sukkah, you make a bracha, Asiyah sukkah. We'll see, we're not going to take it that far. But the Yerushalmi writes, you even make a bracha. And he, not just Asiyah sukkah, because why Asiyah sukkah? Because it's an Netziv right, because the pasuk says, Chag HaSukkos Taseh L'cha, Taseh. So they learn out, even though it's not what it's referring to in the Pshuto Shel Mikra, but they learn out, it uses the word Taseh, so we see there's already a hint, it's a Heksha Mitzvah Ksuva Torah, and therefore it takes on a higher status. Just like the Yerushalmi writes by tzitzis. V'asu ahem tzitzis. There's a mitzvah to make the begad, make the tzitzis. And similarly, uksavtam al mezuzos pesecho visharecha. The mitzvah mezuzah, the Yerushalmi writes also, it's a mitzvah as well, tchilas mitzvah, heksha mitzvah ksuva Torah, of writing the mezuzah. So that's what the Netziv writes. By Sukkot is special. It's not a classical Heksha Mitzvah. It's a Heksha Mitzvah Haksuva Torah. Where do we find it? That's what we find in the Gemara in Kiddushin. The Gemara in Kiddushin is talking about marriage, but it's talking about in the beginning, I believe, of the second parak, Ish Makadish Bo Shlucha. The Mishnah, the Gemara goes into the concept of shlichus. That you can't have, even though, I think there was a case someone was telling me where must have been some big snowstorm, and the chassan, or one of them, the chassan akala, couldn't make it to the chasana. They were discussing different ways, what should they do. So they didn't like my suggestion that they should do it al yedei shliach. But maybe both of them couldn't be there. I think they ended up, they postponed it, and I'm not recommending it as a good idea. But api halacha, that's the Gemara talks about, you could have shlichus by Kiddushin. So over there the Gemara goes into different rabbis who used to go ahead and prepare the fish and the food for Shabbos. And why? So again, to the Netziv writes, because it's a Heksha Mitzvah Ksuva not Torah, but in Tanakh, because it's pasuk in Yeshaya, I believe you read in the Haftorah on Yom Kippur. I think because I read the Haftorah, that's the only reason I think I remember reading it. The pasuk about kavod and oneg in Yeshaya. You thought it was Rosh Hashanah, but I think it was Yom Kippur. If I won't remember that long ago, Rosh Hashanah. So it talks about, we know there's a mitzvah of kavod and oneg. What's the difference between kavod and oneg? So the Vilna Gaon has a famous distinction. Kavod is the things we do before Shabbos, the things you get ready, and oneg is the actual enjoyment of the food on Shabbos, eating when the lights, everything set up, etc. So the pasuk is oneg is quoted in the Navi. So the Netziv right. That's why all these rabbis got together and prepared the food themselves. Big deal. Why waste your time? You go sit and learn, and get your helper, get someone else to go make all the. They're not just just going around, because it was a Heksha Mitzvah Ksuva Torah. So therefore, the Netziv right. So what's the nafkamina? So the two. This says. Is a Heksha Mitzvah Stam, a normal Heksha Mitzvah which has no significance except that it enables you, it's a facilitator, it enables you to do the mitzvah, but there's no inherent value per se in the Heksha Mitzvah. Whether you pick up the Dalaminim or someone else picks up for you, it doesn't make a difference. As long as you end up with kosher Dalaminim, then you're fine. Masha'in can, however, by Sukkah, it's not true. That's why Joel was working on his Sukkah himself. Because the Heksha Mitzvah Ksuva Torah, we'll see one of the nafkaminas we'll see is perhaps it's better mitzvah bo yoter mishucho, as the Gemara says in Kiddushin, that perhaps it's better for you to do the sukkah. We'll explain what that means exactly by doing the sukkah. Does it mean you have to do everything, or are there ways to just participate halachically without physically? We'll come back to that. So
the other meaning, you have to own them.
Yeah, so that's Kachtam Wachem Bayom Harishon. So this halacha of Wachem, you have to own it, but it means, but see, many towns in Europe, it used to be let's say the Rav or one wealthy person used to buy a Daled Minam. Now we live in, wealthy North America, so everyone goes ahead, either they're cheaper, either we have more money or they're cheaper, and usually most people could afford, they buy their own. But strictly speaking, this has to be, it could be mine. I say, I'm giving it to you for the next minute. Matana manas lahagzir. That also works. Then it's halakhically it has to be yours. You don't have to actually buy it. But in terms of, but that's the, and we'll see today. We're not even going to have the mitzvah in Torah this year of Daled Mina because Yom Rishon is on Shabbos. But we'll get to that. So there's a classical Heksha mitzvah. There's no inherent value in buying it. As long as you end up with the Daled Mina on Sukkah is great. Masha'enki, when it comes to Asiyah Sukkah, of the other examples we're giving, the Netziv says, no, there's an Indian Heksha mitzvah Aksuah B'Torah. We'll see, there's an Indian of you doing yourself, a Mainaf Kamina between a Stam Heksha mitzvah and a Heksha mitzvah Aksuah B'Torah, besides mitzvah Bo Yotzeh B'Shlucho, we'll come back to. So perhaps the Mafkamina is maybe the bracha. As we mentioned, the Yerushalmi writes that on the Sukkah, you make a bracha al Asiyah Sukkah. So the question is, but we don't make a bracha, or at least we don't make a bracha on Asiyah Sukkah, so what's the pshat? So we don't necessarily, it's not necessarily a fundamental machlokes, Bavli and Yerushalmi. The Bavli does not make a bracha on a Heksha mitzvah Ksuva B'Torah, but not because we fundamentally disagree with the concept. Not that we're not saying it isn't a mitzvah, but it's not a tchilas mitzvah. We have, because based on another Gemara, the Gemara gives us a klal, Asiyasa hi gmar mitzvah. So we assume, at least when it comes to the bracha, that we make a bracha on the clincher. We agree, maybe perhaps in principle we agree. That's a discussion among the Rishonim, whether you accept this or not, whether it's a Heksha mitzvah Ksuva B'Torah, it's like a tchilas mitzvah, or you reject it at all. But we don't necessarily have to say we reject the principle. Really, we can agree Asiyah Sukkah is a tchilas mitzvah. So where's the bracha? It's a local hilchos brachos issue. It's not a fundamental issue that we deny the building of the sukkah is an Indian. It's only when it comes to brachos, the Bavli, Scholik, and Yerushalmi, it's an issue in hilchos brachos. Yerushalmi holds even on a tchilas mitzvah you make a bracha. But even the Yerushalmi agrees the purpose of the mitzvah isn't to build the sukkah and then go away. It's to sit in the sukkah. But the Bavli holds that if you have a tchilas mitzvah and a sof mitzvah, you should make the bracha all together b'shleimut. That's our minhag. So it's not a how do I know it's not a fundamental machlokas? Because we partially agree. Because the Gemara tells us in Sukkah and Daf Mem Vav that a osa sukkah liatzmo, you make the bracha Shehechiyanu. You make the bracha of Zman. The Gemara says you could have made your Shehechiyanu right now. You just finished building the sukkah. The Gemara says you can make a Shehechiyanu when you're building. In general we pass it anyway. Shehechiyanu even b'shuk. We usually, our minhag is to put a Shehechiyanu together with a mitzvah. But the Gemara says in sukkah, specifically, you build a mitzvah. One can make. It's not the minhag today, but after you make a adin, one can make a Shehechiyanu on building a sukkah. So, but the two totally different types of Shehechiyanu we make. There's a Shehechiyanu, let's say we make, that's on a mitzvah that comes mizman lizman ve'ena tadira. All the Yom Tovim, we make, let's say, the Daled Minim, shofar. We make a Shehechiyanu. It's a mitzvah that comes once in a year, once in a while, and therefore we make a Shehechiyanu. And similarly, there's a similar idea which it's a machlokas Rambam and other Rishonim, machlokas Svardim and Ashkenaz, whether we make a Shehechiyanu on bris milah. So the psak of the Rambam, I think maybe it's the Grushit that continues to be minhag Eretz Yisrael. Someone told me the minhag in Eretz Yisrael, even everyone makes a Shehechiyanu, but maybe it's minhag Agra. That the Rambam passes you make a Shehechiyanu, because a milah is a mitzvah she'ena tadira, and baluzman. What he's saying is like this: you can't potentially have a kid more than every 9 months. That's close to a year. I mean, having your own kid, you could go to many circumcisions and brises, but your own mitzvah of doing a bris, that can only happen every 9 months. That's like a mitzvah which happens mizman lizman eina tadira. So the Rambam sheet is you make a Shehechiyanu. The reason why the minig Ashkenaz is we don't is for another reason, because the Sardi Yanuka, that we might be very happy at the bris, but the child isn't in the best mood after they did the surgery on him. The Mila said obviously, so al Sardi Yanuka, our minig is, and that's the whole discussion about making Simcha Shabona on the Birkas Hamazon. Our minig is we don't do the Shehechiyanu because it's not, we want to downplay the Simcha a little bit because the child isn't very happy now. But the Psach of the Rambam and the Svardim is they have to make. I remember I was at a Svardi bris once, and I guess it was an Ashkenaz Mo actually. I was just happened to be learning the Sugya of Mila not too long ago. So it was a Svardi bris, and I said, "What happened to the Shehechiyanu?" I said, "Yeah, I forgot. You're right, because this guy was an Ashkenaz." See, in Hamilton we have a Svardi Mohel who does all the Ashkenaz. In fact, we'll get to on Yom Kippur. We just had two of them. But you were here. You weren't here. Like I was at my other minyan anyway. But that's one halach of Shehechiyanu is a mitzvah which comes mizman lizman eino tadira. So then you make a Shehechiyanu mila, even though it is. But the issue of Sadi, that's one type of Shehechiyanu. That's the Gemara in Sukkot Daf Mem Vav. There's a Gemara in Eruvin and Daf Mem, which is a totally different Shehechiyanu. That's the Shehechiyanu on the Kedushas Hayom. Every Yontif, you bring in a certain Kedusha, Makadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. So every Yontif has a certain Kedusha which warrants the Shehechiyanu v'Kimanu. So in fact, that's the Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara asks, on Yom Kippur, the Gemara is talking about introducing the concept about making a Shehechiyanu on Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur, even though it's not the same as the Shalosh Regalim in terms of Ola Regel and the mitzvah Simcha, but as the Rambam puts it, they're not days of Yemei Yisimcha Yisera, because this is Yemei Hadin. In fact, that's the Gemara. From the fact the Gemara asked the question, why don't we say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? What's the assumption of the Gemara? That there's an Indian of Simcha that it would warrant Hallel. However, the Gemara says, you're right, you should say Hallel in theory, but however, it's Yemei Hadin, it's a time you're being judged on life and death. It's not appropriate to be cavalier and just singing Shira. So, tone it down, but there is an element, so we pass, and there is an element of Simcha and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah, we have a Suda even, Yom Kippur, maybe we have the Suda Erev Yom Kippur, but it's an Indian of Simcha and Yom Kippur as well. So the Gemara says, let's make a Shehechiyanu, and the Gemara says, let's do it. Every time we make a Shehechiyanu, we want to do it over a koshel yayin, so we always want to have a Shehechiyanu with wine. So the Gemara says, let's because we want to enhance the Shehechiyanu or enhance the koshel bracha, either way or both. So we try to get it over a cup of wine. So the Gemara asks, so if you're making a Shehechiyanu, let's make so they say it's Yom Kippur. What are you doing? You can't drink the cup of wine. So the Gemara says, okay, what about giving it to a katan to drink? One of the suggestions. The Gemara says, nah, it's not such a good idea. It's not the best chinuch, because you don't want the kid growing up every Yom Kippur making the Shehechiyanu and drinking wine, and then when he becomes bar mitzvah, he says, where's my wine? What's going on here? Or he won't ask, he'll just go into the bar and take his wine. So we don't want to get someone accustomed to drinking, maybe not ever, but certainly not on Yom Kippur, and therefore the Gemara says you can't give it to a katan. So the Gemara ends up doing, we do a Shehechiyanu, no cup. But that's a discussion over there. The Gemara seems to go against Alaminig, or at least what the Rishonim bring down. Tosas brings down the famous kasha. What about when Tisha B'Av falls out on either Sunday or it's a Nidche on Shabbos and it's pushed off? So what do you do for Havdalah Saturday night, because you can't drink, or let's say you have a wedding at the Gemara Tosas says about Asara B'Tevis, but which you see parenthetically you can't have a wedding on a Yom Tainus. So the Gemara, one of the suggestions of the Rishonim is you give it to a katan. Well, our minig is we wait until Sunday, but al pi halacha, the valid sheet is in halacha that on Tisha B'Av you can give it to a katan, and similarly, I think we do pass, assuming that's the minig on the Yom Tainus, you could also give it to a katan. So the kash is, how come we're not afraid the kid's going to grow up thinking you could drink wine on Tisha B'Av or on Yom Tainis. So the Rishonim, these are machlokas in the Rishonim, but the Rishonim say because there's a... So some Rishonim say there is... Some Rishonim disagree and say you can never give a katan. And they're against, even on a Yom Tainis, Tisha B'Av, across the board, that Gemara and Eruvin stage, you never give... If you can't drink wine, you can never give it to a katan. And other Rishonim say no, there's a major distinction between the two Gemaras. The Gemara over there by Yom Kippur... That happens, last I checked, it's every year. So a kid's going to grow up every year, Yom Kippur is going to be drinking the wine. But all the other cases, Tisha B'Av falling on Shabbos, or a wedding on Yom Tov, it's not a frequent occurrence. It doesn't happen all the time. So we're not concerned that the kid's no, it wasn't a regular occurrence, he's not going to get accustomed. That's a major machlokas in the Rishonim, which is actually very interesting, halacha machlokas between the Sfarim and Ashkenaz. Which they discuss in terms of what do you do on a Yom Tainis when you have a bris milah on a Yom Tainis, what do you do? So the minhag Ashkenaz, as we'll see, Yom Kippur will be different, but on a regular fast day, so the minhag is you give it to the katan. You give the Boer Pri Apr and you give it to the katan to drink. The Sfarim go with the Rishonim that no, you never. It's not good chinuch. You never give it to a katan. So what do? They give it to the mami. They give it to the mother who has the status, at least, see, al pi halacha, again, obviously you have to check the facts and the reality, but al pi halacha, only the first 7 days, she has a din of a chola sheyesh bo sakana. Technically speaking, day 8, which is the milah, or after, she has a status of a chola she'ein bo sakana. So on the shar tayos, it's not an issue. A chola she'ein bo sakana eats and drinks. So you give it to the mother. That's what happened actually in Hamilton. We had, I think, it might have been Yud Zayin Tamez. I told Begrina, I said she's lucky she's not Sfard. She would have to be drinking from the cup today. And interesting enough, I wasn't there, but on Yom Kippur, they had two bris milas on Yom Kippur. I wasn't there, but what did they do? So that's also another interesting dispute among the Sfardim and Ashkenaz. Again, the Sfardim, so you never give it to a katan. So the problem is on Yom Kippur, strictly speaking, she's a chola she'ein bo sakana. So therefore she can't eat either. Then you get into the whole shirim and that. So the mother must be sick. She can't drink. Then in Achanami, if it's svar, there is no boer pri agafen. However, the minhag Ashkenaz is you give it to the katan hanimo. You give it to the baby. You give it to the baby. He does have a stat. He has no mitzvah to fast, and he's definitely status of a chola. So it's interesting based on that Gemara over there. So
there's no mitzvah of peanut butter.
Right. There's no. But we're not Ashkenaz. But see, Sfardim even won't give it. Even then, they just do a low plug. They won't even give it to.
You have to get it from Yom Kippur.
You have to get enough.
What?
Isn't there an amount that you have to drink?
No, this on that is the sip and stuff. There's no
That's for
But right, for brother, for different halachas you do have to kiddush and that. But there's apparently unless you're gonna get the baby real drunk then. But
no one else is cutting the meal because you say certain people say they never give us the wine, so they must say it's a low plug, even though.
Yeah, the Sfardim. I mean, I have to. Within Sfardim, you always have different minhagim, but I believe the straight psak of the machaber of the Sfardim is that you wouldn't, because we assume, even though it's a discussion we assume the Ikar Hadin, the Boer Pri Agafen, is in Likuva in the Mila.
I'm thinking from that Yom Kippur question.
Right.
Shehechiyanu on Boer Pri Agafen Yom Kippur, they don't do it because of China.
Oh, you mean Shehechiyanu? It's actually right. The Sfarim make a Shehechiyanu also on the Mila. Yeah.
The fact is that theoretically, you can give it to the Katan and Nemo.
Right.
There's no mitzvah china from it.
Exactly, low plug, yeah. But
that must be a low plug.
Exactly, yeah.
What are you accomplishing? You're trying to make somebody be yotze with the bracha al shmei kona, right? That the baby can't be shmei kona.
No, that's a kasha. Yeah, that's a kasha they ask on the Ramah. So who are you kidding? So you normally give it. It's a good kasha. The guy asks. By other cases, we try to give a katan at least. It's an in-between stage. He knows. We try to get him before he's like a gil chinach, but he knows enough. What are you gaining? So after that, so the Rav as a whole yisod, that really perhaps it's halacha we have that why do we have a bracha on a, why do we make a bracha, I'd say, why do we want to have a Borei Pri Hagafen and a Shehechiyanu in general? So Pashas, why do we have, why do you have to drink the wine? Pashas, if you don't drink the Borei Pri Hagafen, it's a bracha levatala. That's why. So based on a Rashi and Brachos, the Rav has a whole yisod, not just by here, but in general, that I think Rashi writes, based on Mavarak Sar, actually, Rashi writes the Lashon and Genaihu Kosho Bracha. In other words, it's not really a din in drinking. In other words, the only reason we have the wine, it's a Genai to Kosho Bracha, that you have to go ahead and, you're not going to drink from it. But it's not a din in, you really don't technically, don't need the bracha to be yotzei. That's the kasha. Your kasha they all ask under Ramah, what exactly has that worked in? The cousin doesn't know what's going on, but that's it. They try to give some lumdis along those lines to get into what is the nature of why we're making a Borei Pri Hagafen. The pashas, why do you have to drink? Because bracha levatala. But Rashi writes because kenaihu kosher bracha. You're only drinking, but you really don't. The Borei Pri Hagafen is incidental. I'm only drinking because I'm doing it. It's to make the bracha over the situation, and the drinking's incidental. So therefore, it's incidental. You can even dump it on a katan hanimo along those lines. But a lot of people have a difficulty with the Ramah based on your kasha. You wanted to say something?
No.
Yeah. So that's so the two different Shechiyanos, two fundamentally different. A Shehechiyanu on a mitzvah she'enu tadira comes mizman lizman, and a totally different Shehechiyanu on Kedushas Hayom. So let's go see. So by Rosh Hashanah, let's say. So we made a Shehechiyanu at night at Kiddush. That was on what? That was on the Kedushas Hayom. That's when Yontif started. But the Shehechiyanu we made on the shofar, that was the next morning. It was a totally different Shehechiyanu. It was the Shehechiyanu on the mitzvah, which is Eino Tadira, and similarly on Sukkot. So let's say the Shehechiyanu we're going to make at night is definitely bringing the Kedushas Hayom. And when we make a Shehechiyanu on the Lulav, that's on a mitzvah Sheino Tadira. But what's interesting here is there seems to be an overlap. What about the mitzvah of Sukkah? So this mitzvah of Sukkah begins at night. So therefore the Shehechiyanu we make on the night of Sukkot has a dual role. It serves as a bracha on the Kedushas Hayom, but it also serves as a mitzvah on the mitzvah Sukkah, because they come on the same time. In fact, that's what, it's always an issue that comes up, the Shehechiyanu, especially after Yom Kippur. We know in general there's an issue, women usually light candles, but it could be men as well. And let's say, so we assume, that you don't have to be makabel Shabbos or Yontif when you light candles. In other words, the assumption is if a man who usually doesn't makabel Shabbos when he lights, this could be neutral. You don't have to actually think anything. I guess it's not really a woman or man. It depends on what you do. But someone normally accepts Shabbos by lighting candles. That if you want to get in your car and drive to shul, you have to have in mind, or to malacha, you have to have in mind you're not being, or else we assume you are. But someone who normally is makabel Shabbos, Mizmor Shir or Chaldodi, so then as long as you're neutral, the assumption is that you're not makabel Shabbos. So the issue comes up especially on Yom Kippur, but it's true on any Yontif, the Shehechiyanu. That's true by Hadlakas Neiros. Even though there are some shitas in the Rishonim, which we don't pass to like, that Hadlakas Neiros is makabel Shabbos or Yontif Bal Karcha. We don't pass in that way, that you're accepted again. So we assume, but we do accept after Shehechiyanu, that once you make a Shehechiyanu, you can't have a mind Shehechiyanu, okay, now I'll accept, because Shehechiyanu has to be when there's Kedushas Hayom right now. They can't do on Kedushas Hayom an hour from now or later. So once you make the Shehechiyanu, so by definition it's Yontiv now. So therefore you can't go make a Shehechiyanu and get in the car. So therefore many women, so if they're going to come to shul, call nidre, so they should definitely not make the Shehechiyanu. I mean, they could make a Shehechiyanu and walk, but that's okay also. But a Shehechiyanu, anyway, the Rabbi Yaakov Ebden was against anyway in general women making Shehechiyanu when they do Hadlakas Neiros. I think he tried to convince his wife not to, but his wife wouldn't even listen to him, so he stopped trying. But he said, my mother did it, and that's it, I don't want to hear from it. But so I think the reason why he said he thinks it's better to wait for Kiddush in general, because he felt there might be a hefsek in the Kiddush. Because even if you assume a woman's chayav in the Kiddush, let's assume she is Kiddush on Yantiv, and it's Shabbos this year anyway, but perhaps if she already said the Shehechiyanu, so perhaps when the man is saying in the Shehechiyanu Kiddush, that could be a hefsek in between for the woman, and might ruin her kids. I think he said something along those lines. But either way, he said
between what and what?
No, hefsek in the middle. Between, because you make in the middle of Kiddush, you're making Shehechiyanu.
You're already Mekadosh the Yom at that point.
No, but in between the drinking from the boy Fri Apr,
you don't even have to drink.
Right. No, I'm saying is the minig in terms of assuming that you don't have to drink, right? But in terms of, but usually you go around the room and they drink, so then perhaps they need a new boy Fri Apr. Either way, I'm saying that's
another gafen.
Yeah, no, okay, but they don't. I'm not saying it can't be worked out.
I think it's a hefsek.
No,
You're not saying the Shehechiyanu.
Yeah. No, I said that's. I'm not. That's why most don't. That's why most don't accept. I'm saying I'm not even. I vaguely remember saying I'm not even 100%. He said I think that's the he definitely said not to make. I think that was one of the reasons he said it, because he had some reason why he wanted to buy Kiddush. But the main reason is because you don't want to say Shehechiyanu if you're not, unless you're ready to makabel yantiv. He thought it was a good idea to wait until, not just him, other poskim also, to do it by, as we'll see, because the minhag gets to do it all one time, to do it with Kiddush. But either way, I'm
just guessing, but maybe he means the other way around. Maybe he doesn't want you to be, you're being sort of Mekadosh the Yom, and then you're not being Yosef Kiddush, because you were already Mekadosh the Yom with Shehechiyanu.
Yeah, that would
sound more.
Right, but I'm saying either way, but the point being is, maybe that's why his wife didn't like his lumdis either, but either way, he didn't listen to him. But the point being is, so on Shehechiyanu, so therefore on Yom Kippur it's more of an issue, so people go out, and they, and so either people don't know, but if you do know, either you walk the shul or you do it.
They light candles at shul.
Right, well that's a separate problem, because, because then, which the poskim talk about, which is another problem, is people light candles in shul, or let's say Ramosha has a tshuva about in a hotel, about people light in the dining room. It's terrible. The Rabbi Yaakov, Ramosha, I won't say all the poskim, but a good consensus say, maybe not even Yotzei. Halakha there is it didn't have to be in the bias. So there's the Gemara talks about, the Rishon talk about, let's say what they're talking about, what's the kfiyat if you're a yeshiva. They were talking about, let's say if you were a yeshiva bakar, you lived in the dorm, but basically there was a sad thing, you ate all your meals in this person. It was more than just going there for a meal. You basically lived there, you ate all your meals there. So that's the one can discuss. Maybe that's the kaviyas over sleeping or eating. It's a discussion. So then maybe this is what to talk about. But normally a person's just eating, they live in one home, they're going out to eat somewhere. So lighting at someone else's house is very problematic, and lighting even in the hotels, in the public dining room, is problematic. They say you have to do it in your own. In fact, so Ramosha, Rav Yaakov, they're all saying you should light in your own room. Your room that you renting out or you're paying for, that's your room. And therefore you should light in your room. I live in a fire hazard. Lighting candles, let's say you can't light a fire in your room. So that's actually, so most poskim also assume that electric lights are good. Incandescent bulbs, that's which is a separate issue about the issue of Motzei Yom Kippur, about if you don't have a pre-existing flame, so Pashas, you just go, you find an electric lighter, you just make a flame. Someone told me the Rav held if you don't have a pre-existing flame, you won't even make a Bor Ma'esh, based on the issue of Yom Kippur, because you're showing you're not allowed to have Eish on Yom Kippur. But either way, that's a discussion, but putting Yom Kippur aside,
all this is on the assumption that you will spend some time in the room.
Right, right. So therefore, that's what Ramosha writes. So if you're gonna, so what do you do? So what he says is you should light candles before you go and sit there, say some Tehillim more, and make sure you use, because the time you get home, then it's out. But what the Rav suggested. What was his kasha?
Nothing.
That's what the Rav and Rabbi Yaakov used to tell his wife that you should go, like they turn on the bathroom, turn on a light, and you should, and make the bracha. But of course, Rabbi Yaakov's wife, like all other women, they had a minute, they felt strongly about making it, and they didn't buy the electric being aged. So therefore he tells you, what you do is, don't worry, what you do is turn on the light in your room, then if you want to go downstairs and do it as quickly, it's achalei anyway, because you're making the, go down quickly, go to the diner, make your bracha, and incorporate it on everything. So, but really, what?
Make your bracha when?
No, I'm just saying she used to make the bracha on the age downstairs, but you could have in mind it's going on. She wanted to light a candle, so he was just okay. Forget the candle,
because lighting there is usually after anyway. So.
No, that's he said. No, that's what the Rabbi Yaakov writes. Since you're making the bracha anyway, so try to get minimize the hefsek. Get down there, make your bracha, but have in mind that it's going on the Aish in your room. Then he said, it's okay. Because in fact, the Rav said that all the time. The Rav felt very strongly about, especially today, because what's the whole purpose of lighting candles is Yishalom Bayis, you should be walking around in the dark. But today, we have electric lights, and people barely get hana from the candles, Tosef Azor. So the Rav felt very strongly that one should, every Yontiv, every Friday night, before you go into all the houses, shut off and turn on the lights that you want on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and then you light the candles and have in mind that the bracha is going on all of them, because that's the ikr. The ikr is to have light in your house. So most assume you can make a bracha on electric as well, incandescent bulb, and therefore that's what they say. So so that's what one has to do. One has to. It's a problem making it, making lighting in shul in a public place. Even I've seen it done in many places, but the consensus opposed to it is clearly against it. You had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering something about this. You said Shehechiyanu is Makabel Shabbos Bar is Makabel Yom Tov.
Or Shabbos, right?
No, Shehechiyanu is Makabel Shabbos Bar.
Right.
But that's only on the person making the Shehechiyanu.
Right. Right. It would be on the women. And general rule.
Because the general rule is the women in the house Makabel Shabbos with the person who's lighting the candles. Right.
Well, that's right. That seems to be less and less common today. But at one point that was true. Today, many times women accept it later. That especially early minyanim.
Right.
Which wasn't prevalent in Europe. I think it's a North American thing. So now many times, that's remotely about women lighting. Let's say the husband goes to shul for the early minyan, so the woman still needs more time. She has to get ready for Shabbos. So as long as you have everything ready before the husband comes back. But since we're only being makabel Shabbos early or Yontiv early for convenience, what do you mean for convenience? What's my raya? Because I don't see anyone making Shabbos early in the winter. When candlelighting is 4:30, I don't see the big 3:15 plaga mincha. You do it because it's your convenience. Therefore, you can't. Something on your convenience, you can't. It's not going to be, accepted. So we assume in general, it's always ideal if the whole house accepts together. But bottom line, the woman does it on her own.
The woman who lights is one thing, but also the women in the house. But by the Shehechiyanu. But a woman can say, I'm not going to be makabel with her.
Exactly, yeah.
But
the other woman, right? The other woman has the right. Other people have a right not to be. Right.
The fact is with the Shehechiyanu, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
But the Shehechiyanu cannot be balkorach on the other women. It can be only balkorach on the woman saying the Shehechiyanu.
Yeah. Because they could just, they're not. It's only once you right. But it is balkorach. You can't say since. It's balkorach. If you're accepting Shehechiyanu, you can't say, well, it's only that right. That part you can't split.
But it's an interesting question. If it was Shehechiyanu, you can be what?
Is that so obvious? Because whoever the chiyuv is on the entire household. Whoever's lighting is being motzi everyone in that household.
Yeah,
so is that so obvious that if the balkorach applies to her, that does not apply to everybody else?
No, but because she's accepting Shabbos. Even when she lights candles, vis-a-vis lighting the candles, it's clearly not Baal Korban. She accepts Shabbos, no one else accepts Shabbos.
Was she being mostly the other women with Shehechiyanu too?
That's the question. I would think not.
Right, also the question is what's pshat anyway?
Yes, because they don't say it.
All
right, they don't say it.
Unless when they hear Shehechiyanu or Kiddush.
Right. Which is also Joel's very interesting question. Also, what's pshat? Is it working? I think is Ner Shabbos. Is it a Shomea Ka'onet thing or? No, there's a cholus on the bias that you have to, but not that she's doing it for me or not. In order,
it has to be done.
Yeah, that's more. It seems to be the passion. That's the discussion in the Archon.
That's where Shehechiyanu comes different.
Right, the
Shehechiyanu really has to be Shmei Ka'on, I would think.
Right, because that's the kedusha. That's the kedusha. So it could be right. It could be maybe if those sheets who hold that however there is a makabel Shabbos Bakarcha, then maybe then. Maybe.
Yeah,
then it'd be like I said. Maybe then you could be makabel. Maybe that's the minig of everyone being. Maybe that's the sheet. Yechoshish of that sheet, and that's why they don't like people making Shabbos at different times. And once the house is makabel Shabbos, that's it. It could be working with that sheet which was the minig for a long time that everyone accepts Shabbos at the same time. But today, that doesn't seem to be the minig, and not necessarily because this is the way it works out with the way it's set up. But so that's
huge nafkamina. So every Yom Tov, all the other women have to know: am I being yotze in the kiddush or not?
No, right.
Was I yotze already with Shehechiyanu?
No, right. No, that's why they recommend to say Shehechiyanu at kiddush, and you do it together at.
Yeah, but every. Nessie has to think to herself, was I Yotze? No, she doesn't. So was I Yotze with a Shehechiyanu that Lisa made?
No, but she's...
Or is she being Yotze with my Shehechiyanu?
But who said she was even there? You listened to the Brachos and that?
Back to the same issue. Do you have to be there?
Yeah.
But let's say she was there.
Yeah, that's right. Then it'd be no different than if she was there listening to Shehechiyanu being Yotze with it. It'd be no different than Lisa. That'd be the same. But she's not there. She has to be,
and if she's not there, it's still questionable.
Yeah, I mean, Pashas, she'd have to make the Shehechiyanu later because it's not a Shehechiyanu on the whole house. Shehechiyanu, every person's chayav in the Shehechiyanu. It's part of the kiddush.
Assuming she
right, the one who makes kiddush. Yeah, right. So anyway, right, they say anyway, it's a good idea because of the Yom Kippur thing. Certainly it's good on Yom Kippur not to do it, but because the people might drive. But in general, so therefore, most because of that reason, people, they go to shul now. So if you leave the Shehechiyanu, there's no harm. In fact, some might think at least it's the same, if not better, to leave the Shehechiyanu for the Kiddush. So that's a some post can recommend that the woman should never do the Shehechiyanu at Halakas Neiros. You might as well wait and do it biyotze with the Kiddush together. But not that she can't, but you just have to be careful. If you make a Shehechiyanu, you have to know you're accepting Yenta. So there's two types of Shehechiyanu. The Shehechiyanu on the mitzvah.
That's an interesting thing because nobody denies this is the way it's been done for 2,000 years.
Exactly.
And now we should change it. That's not usually.
No, right. But could be.
The star doesn't sound good, so let's change it.
They're changing only because it could be the practical. It could be, women didn't leave the house or go to shul like they do, like in the past 50. Both the main concern is making the Shehechiyanu and then continuing doing malacha and driving to shul. That's the type of concern. So that wasn't a concern in Europe where everyone was bakabla at the same time. They made Shehechiyanu. That was it, But that's right. But not. You're right. In principle, we don't change minhagim. In fact, it was very hard. Rabbi Yaakov had a hard time changing, even if he thought he had a good reason. But either way, whatever. If a woman has a strong minik, our mother did, then I wouldn't make a big issue over it. But if she has in mind, then no reason not to wait till we do it at Kiddush. So I think it's what Schechter recommends also. I think that's what I told Leslie she could wait. I don't really care either way, but I think I tell her to wait for Shehechiyanu or Kiddush now. So this let me just tie it into Sukkah here. So we said there's a Shehechiyanu on a mitzvah sheina tadira shabal mizman lizman, and there's a mitzvah on the kedusha of the yom. So on Rosh Hashanah we said they were separate at nighttime and shofar, and similarly for lulav in the morning, and and a night. But what about Sukkah? Sukkah is the same one. So there's an interesting, and it seems to be, I think it's the Rad, and I think it's our minhag, unless you follow minhag Hagra, that there's interesting minhag of changing around the order of Kiddush between the first night and second night. So the first night we make the Kiddush, the Leishe Basukah, and then the Shehechiyanu. And the Vilna Gaon says that he has in second day, like first day, you don't switch, but that doesn't seem to be the minhag unless you're a Granik. The minhag is that you make the Shehechiyanu and then you make the Leishe. What's the pshat? Why reverse the order on the second night of Yontif? So what's that all about? So the Ran explains this Yisod, that really fundamentally we agree that Heksha Mitzvah Ksuv Torah Tchilas Mitzvah is a mitzvah. The only reason we don't make a bracha on a Berachos HaMitzvah is Asiyasi Gemar Mitzvah, so we go the brachas on the clincher. But fundamentally we recognize you're doing a mitzvah. How it's a raya? Because we paskin, if you make a Shehechiyanu, our minhag is to wait to put the Shehechiyanu together when you're doing the yeshiva sukkah. But Mikra Adin we paskin, if you make a Shehechiyanu tonight when you build the sukkah, you fulfill. Of course, you'll meet another Shehechiyanu for Kiddush because that's the Kedushas Hayom. But our minhag is to try to do them both together, and it's done Bishlei Musa. But Mikra Adin we paskin that if you make a Shehechiyanu even before Sukkot on the sukkah, it's a go. That's what the Ran says. So what's pshat here? So the first night of Sukkot, so we want a Shehechiyanu to go on the Kedushas Hayom, and we want it to go on Yeshiva Sukkah, on Asiyah Sukkah. So therefore you're making the Shehechiyanu at the end. However, so what do we do the second night? The second night it's a Sveika Diyoma. We treat it like a doubt. So maybe tonight's the first night. So out the Shehechiyanu Kedushas Hayom, we can't take any chances. Because the luck is I can't make a Shehechiyanu on the Kedushas Hayom. Yesterday's doesn't count if today is the Kedushas Hayom. So we need another Shehechiyanu out Sveika Diyoma, Yom Tov Sheni, we definitely need it. What about out the mitzvah of Sukkah? So that's the round that we all need, because Lamanashah, even yesterday wasn't Sukkot, but we passed in the Shehechiyanu, you could be Yotzei, on the you can even make a Shehechiyanu on the sukkah, even on the I'm not sure if he says that the sukkah covers. If the Ram would say that they made two Shechechiyanus, so the one on the Siyas sukkah covers the, assuming that Siyas sukkah covers the yeshiva sukkah, so then you won't have to make another Shehechiyanu. He's assuming, he says, because you don't need the Shehechiyanu to cover the sukkah. That you already, because even if you make it a week before Sukkot, the Yotze the Shehechiyanu, that's how he explains the different minhag of changing the Seder of Brachos, because the first one is going on the Kedushas Hayom that you need, because if it's not Sukkot, it doesn't work. You have to make Shehechiyanu then. Masha'inkin, when it comes to the mitzvah of Sukkah, strictly speaking, I guess Osa Sukkaso, the one Shehechiyanu is going on both. We like making L'chadchila the Shehechiyanu on the Gemar Asiyat. This is like we say the Bracha Leishe Basukah for the Gemar. L'chadchila we also prefer to make the Shehechiyanu on the Sukkah on the Gemar, but the Rad is saying if you made the Shehechiyanu apparently beforehand on the Sukkah, so therefore you'd be Yotze the Shehechiyanu. So therefore that's our minhag. And the second I was showing the Shehechiyanu is only going on the Kedushas Hayom, and it's not necessary for going on the mitzvah of Sukkot.
The actual yeshiva sukkah doesn't need a second Shehechiyanu.
Right, after the Shehechiyanu we make, so we go the Kiddush, Shehechiyanu, and the Leishe Basukah at the end.